All information contained in this podcast is general in nature and does not consider your individual circumstances. You should consider the appropriateness of this information with regards to your individual objectives, financial situation, and needs. Welcome to Sharing More Than the Sheets, a podcast to help you and your partner make better financial and lifestyle decisions so that you can both focus on the things that you love. I'm your host, Michael Khouri, financial planner, green thumb, husband, and just dad. This segment is called Michael's Magic Moment. It's my opportunity to play a little snippet from one of our previous episodes, which resonated with our listeners, that I received feedback from, or I felt really had an impact on some people's lives. Hope you enjoy. I'm regularly contacted by people who tell me, Michael, you talk about budgeting, you talk about managing money and all these things. We've tried it and it doesn't work. And for me, after doing this for a very long time, I've learned that there's never just one issue. And secondly, that every single person or every single couple's struggle is completely different. And there's never a single thing that I see. Now, saying that, there are some common issues that I see regularly. And today we're going to go back to an episode that I did, episode 90. So we're at 189 at the moment. So this is literally the halfway mark in a way from when we started. And I talk about 5 things that people are doing wrong with their budget. And you'll probably relate to a couple of them. I mean, even me listening back at it, there's even one thing in there that I can relate to, no budget is perfect, no person is perfect, no relationship is perfect when it comes to money, and even me and my wife. So we're humans, we make mistakes, we need to be reminded of things, we need to work on things. And the benefit of this episode is massive to those that are not just listening to it, but if you know anyone that you should share this with, any couples, anyone that you know that has spoken to you about managing money or budgeting, and maybe they were discouraged, maybe they tried to do something over the years and said, this isn't working, we've tried the whole budgeting thing, it didn't work out for us. I think they need to listen to this episode. And even better, I think they should get in contact with me or a financial advisor that's this passionate about it so that they can just have a discussion. And there may be something that an advisor can help with. There may not be. We're not magicians or miracle workers, but usually there's a couple of things that we spot out, and usually with some proper coaching and some very, we'll say productive discussions, we can help many people, including potentially yourself, to get your money on track and to try to work out what it could be that's just not working when it comes to budgeting. The first part about it is, just like any plan, is to be on the same page. To sit down together and both buy into the idea of having a budget, and to both buy into the idea of having something that is being put together that is going to be followed. If there is no buy-in, and if both sides aren't on the same page, it's literally a recipe for disaster. Because what can happen is one person, for example, thinks it's the best idea in the world. The other person thinks it's not going to work, but they just agree to be part of it just for the sake of it and just to see how things go. Time goes by, budget doesn't work. The person that's committed and liked the idea is still going on with it. And the other person, which sort of just joined for the ride for the sake of it, is starting to turn around and be like, see, I told you it wasn't going to work, or isn't willing to persevere and put in the extra time and effort to see it as a success. The other issue is when things get tough or when things get really difficult. If both sides haven't bought in and they're not on the same page and they aren't both equally invested into the idea of having a budget, then that's also not going to work either. The second thing is not having proper structure. So I've seen many budgets where, for example, it'll have only 2 bank accounts when the couple should probably have 3 or 4. Or a situation where there's 15 bank accounts when really only 3 is needed. And this can create so many issues because, first of all, having a structure that isn't logical and doesn't have proper strategy to it can just become really draining mentally and time-wise. And it can also become too complicated and create unnecessary stress and unnecessary work. The other part about it as well is through that structure, if it's not documented properly and if it's not laid out clearly for everyone to understand, it makes it really difficult to follow, because what you'll actually find is that you will be in a position where it's working, the budget's doing what it should be doing, but the second something changes or the second something doesn't work the way it should, everything falls to pieces. And the easiest way I can explain it is that there's too many moving parts, or not enough, not enough moving parts essentially. And when there isn't this proper structure in place, it does make it really, really hard to follow a budget and to stick to one. The third mistake that I see is not having enough discipline, not having the perseverance, not having the willpower, or even the interest in sticking to the budget. You can have the most amazing budget in the world, but if you're not sticking to it, it's not going to do anything for you. And part of that process can be buying in and being, as I said on the first point, but being acceptable to the changes that you've both agreed to. And for example, if you say to yourself, hey, let's spend only $100 a week on eating out, sticking to that $100. Yes, you might go over a little bit here or there, but consciously trying to stick to that limit is going to make such a big difference compared to just ignoring it and just assuming that it's all going to work out. The other part about it as well is there's going to be months where things are tough. We all have these periods, whether it's a week or a month or even a year, where things are just really tough. And without proper discipline and without sticking to the strategy and the budget that you've put together, you'll actually find that it's going to be a lot harder to persevere and to continue with it as well. Because as soon as things start falling apart, it makes it a lot harder to stick to the budget. Part of that discipline process could be having accountability. So this is where having a financial advisor helps, someone to hold you accountable, where we'll have reviews at least once a year normally and track things to see if you're on track. You have someone there contacting you regularly, or you contacting that person regularly. That also makes a really big difference, because again, there's no point having gym membership if you don't have a personal trainer or a friend or a buddy to go with. Yes, some people can do it by themselves and they can gym without needing anyone there, but most people normally need some sort of motivation or at least some sort of accountability. These podcasts have been brought to you by Better Financial Planning Australia. To book a free 15-minute phone chat, visit betterfinancialplanning.com.au. The fourth mistake that I see is not having realistic figures in the budget. I've seen many budgets which actually look really good, and they are structured really well, and there is discipline, there is motivation, and there's even this urgency from a couple to really, really make it work, and this need and this hunger, but it's just not working. And when I sit down and start looking through the figures and looking at the budget and how much is going where, I actually find that the figures just aren't realistic, where either the calculation has been done wrong, where there's a bill that's, for example, $1,000 a year. It's then divided by, we'll say $1,000 a month, for example, and it's divided by 2 to work out the fortnight. Well, not all months have 4 weeks in them, for example. And I know it's just a very small difference, but it does make a big difference in the long run. The other thing as well is sometimes couples will say, yeah, well, we're going to stick to $50 a week eating out. And by the way, I like to use takeaway a lot as an example when I talk about budgeting, because our stomachs are very different to our minds. And takeaway is normally one of those things that people do spend a lot more on than they should. But as an example, a couple might say, you know what, we're going to stick to $50 a week on takeaway. But they both know deep down that that's not realistic, and that they should spend at least 80, for example, or 100. And the issue with that as well is that by not having realistic figures, you're literally you're starting off on the wrong foot, and you're creating a budget and you're trying to follow a budget which is not possible to be followed. Part of these realistic figures as well could be sometimes slightly over-exaggerating the expenses, but by not too much as well. Because if, for example, you spend $80 a week on fuel, and you say, you know what, let's just make it $200 to be safe. Well, that's a bit high, and if it's not realistic, then it's going to be it'll just skew your whole financial plan or your budget, essentially, because you'll be planning for something. There's opportunity cost there because there's something else that money could be going towards. But if you spend $80 on fuel and you say, you know what, let's just make it $100 just to be safe, in my opinion, that's okay, because it's not too much higher. There's a small variance, but at least you're leaving some room there for error and, fuel price rises. The issue as well of not having realistic figures is when the accounts aren't enough, what you're actually doing, and this happens a lot, but you're essentially robbing Peter to pay Paul. You're having a bill comes in and suddenly you're having to take money out of your savings account to put it into the bills account to cover that bill because there wasn't enough money in there. And this is something that you may not realize initially, because initially there might be a surplus or there might be a bit of money moving around, but eventually the crunch will come. And if you haven't used accurate figures in your budget, then you are going to be struggling because accounts will run out of money and you'll be thinking, okay, well, what do we do now? This isn't working. And then that's where everything else falls into place. And suddenly people give up and they start blaming each other and it causes all these sorts of issues. And then most importantly, well, not most importantly, but the main issue here is that couples then get discouraged and they don't want to even budget anymore because they've tried it, it didn't work. And that's an issue that I hear a lot as well, where I'll meet a couple and they'll say to me, hey, we tried to budget, we did the whole budgeting thing, it just didn't work out for us. And when I start looking into why, some of these issues start to pop up. The fifth point, and the last one that I'll go through in this episode, is not reviewing the budget regularly. So you can have a budget that's in place, that's working really, really well, that's doing exactly what it should be doing. But as we know, expenses change, income changes, the price of things go up. You might spend $200 a week on groceries one year, but the next year it might be $250. Children get older. They eat more when they get older. You can ask me that. And the other part about it as well is insurance premiums change, car registration changes, all these things that are in your budget change. And initially the changes may not seem that big, but it does make a really big difference when you look at it over the year and you total these figures. So I like to keep an Excel spreadsheet on my desktop, and as bills change or as rates change for certain things, I just update that sheet to update my totals as to how much needs to go into each account. And this is something that I talk to my clients about regularly, and this is something that I regularly review for myself and for my clients when I do reviews for them as well. But this is the reason sometimes where budgets do work initially and they just stop working. And it's just because the figures have not been updated. Maybe initially you only had to put $4,000 into your bills account every month, but now it's $4,500. So regularly reviewing all that and reviewing the overall budget just to make sure it's working. Now, a good budget, if it has proper structure, and as long as your circumstance doesn't change significantly, should pretty much stay the same, except for just maybe some of the figures that are in it. So there's many different parts to this whole process of budgeting. There are many different ways to manage a budget. The last thing you should do is to have the she'll be right mentality. And the most important thing you can do is talk to your partner, talk to your financial advisor. If you don't have a financial advisor, get a financial advisor, contact me. I'm always happy to have discussions. And if you can at least work out what you need to do to have this in place, to have a budget and to have structure, it will make life a lot easier. And if you can identify some of these issues and work on them together, you will find that you will not only manage your money better, but you will be able to make smarter and better financial decisions so that you can focus on the things that you love. Thanks for joining us on Sharing More Than the Sheets. Please make sure you subscribe to be updated with future episode releases, and feel free to share this episode with any friends or family that you think it might benefit. Please visit us at sharingmorethanthesheets.com.au to submit questions or requests for future podcast topics. These podcasts have been brought to you by Better Financial Planning Australia. To book a 15-minute phone chat, visit betterfinancialplanning.com.au.